In the world of extreme long-range shooting, where millimeters separate legends from forgotten names, where wind speed calculations can make or break a career, and where the slightest tremor of a finger can send a bullet miles off target, one woman stood at the firing line with something that made hardened marksmen snicker behind her back. It wasn't her gender that drew the whispers and barely contained laughter from the gallery of seasoned shooters. It wasn't her age, her size, or even her unconventional shooting stance that had become the subject of hushed conversations around the range. It was the rifle she carried with quiet confidence, a custom-built precision instrument painted in the most unlikely color imaginable for such a serious sport, bubblegum pink. As she methodically set up her equipment under the scorching desert sun, adjusting her scope with the precision of a surgeon, the murmurs grew louder. Veteran marksmen, some with decades of experience and walls full of trophies, exchanged knowing glances. Military snipers who had made impossible shots in the heat of combat shook their heads in apparent disbelief. Range officials tried to maintain their professional composure while fighting back smirks. "This isn't a fashion show," someone muttered from the crowd. "Maybe she's confused about which competition she signed up for," another voice added, followed by suppressed chuckles. But what none of them knew, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that they were about to witness something that would be talked about in shooting circles for generations to come. They were about to see a shot so extraordinary, so impossibly precise, that would rewrite the record books and force an entire community to question everything they thought they knew about marksmanship. The target sat 6,000 meters away, nearly 4 miles of desert air, heat shimmer, and unpredictable wind patterns. At that distance, the bullet would take over 6 seconds to reach its destination, traveling through multiple wind layers, temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure changes. It was a shot that most professional marksmen wouldn't even attempt, let alone expect to make. As she settled behind her pink rifle, the laughter began to die down. Something in her posture, her methodical preparation, her absolute stillness suggested that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this woman than met the eye. What happened next would silence every critic, humble every skeptic, and create a legend that would inspire a new generation of shooters around the world. This is the story of how one woman, one pink rifle, and one impossible shot changed everything. Sarah Mitchell never intended to become a marksman. Growing up in the small farming town of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, her childhood was filled with 4-H clubs, county fairs, and helping her father tend to their family's modest dairy farm. At 17, she was more interested in veterinary science than firearms, spending her afternoons studying animal behavior and dreaming of a career healing sick cattle and horses. The rifle range at the local gun club was something she passed by every day on her way to school, hearing the distant crack of gunfire echoing across the cornfields. Her father, Tom Mitchell, was a weekend shooter who enjoyed the social aspect more than the competition. He would spend Saturday mornings at the range, drinking coffee with other farmers and taking leisurely shots at paper targets set up at comfortable distances. Everything changed on a humid July morning in 2010. Sarah had planned to spend the day reading veterinary journals in preparation for her college applications, but her father's shooting partner had called in sick, leaving Tom without his usual weekend companion. With genuine reluctance, Sarah agreed to accompany him to the range, bringing along her biology textbook and expecting to spend the morning studying in the air-conditioned clubhouse. The Cedar Rapids Gun Club was a modest facility carved out of former farmland, with shooting benches arranged in neat rows facing targets at various distances. The longest range stretched out to 300 yards, which the local farmers considered quite impressive for recreational shooting. Most members were content to work on their hunting accuracy, preparing for deer season, or simply enjoying the meditative rhythm of loading, aiming, and firing. Sarah's first encounter with shooting was entirely accidental. While her father chatted with friends about corn prices and weather patterns, she wandered over to examine the rifles lined up on the shooting benches. One particular gun caught her attention, a sleek bolt-action rifle with an intricate scope that seemed almost like a piece of scientific equipment. "That's a Remington 700, explained Charlie Henderson, the club's grizzled range master who had noticed her interest. "Custom built for long-range work. Owner's out of town, but he won't mind if you take a look." Charlie had been running the range for 15 years and had seen plenty of curious teenagers come and go, most losing interest after a few shots. Sarah lifted the rifle carefully, immediately struck by its weight and balance. Unlike the hunting rifles she had occasionally seen her father clean, this weapon felt purposeful, engineered with precision that reminded her of the surgical instruments she had read about in her veterinary texts. The scope was a work of art in itself, with minute adjustment dials and crosshairs that seemed to slice the world into mathematical quadrants. "Want to try a shot?" Charlie asked, noting the intensity with which she examined the rifle. "I've got some target loads that won't kick too hard." Against her better judgment, Sarah found herself nodding. Charlie set up a paper target at 100 yards and spent 10 minutes explaining the basics of rifle shooting, breathing, sight alignment, trigger control. Sarah listened with the same focused attention she brought to her science classes, treating each instruction as a formula to be understood and applied. Her first shot missed the target entirely, the bullet disappearing somewhere into the dirt berm behind the paper. Charlie chuckled and made minor adjustments to her stance, explaining how to use her bone structure to create a stable shooting platform. Her second shot clipped the edge of the target, and her third found the white scoring rings. "Not bad for a beginner," Charlie said, lowering his binoculars. "Most folks take a dozen shots just to hit paper." But Sarah was already absorbed in the mechanics of what had just happened. She began asking questions that surprised Charlie with their sophistication. How did atmospheric pressure affect bullet flight? What role did temperature play in powder burn rates? How did rifling twist rates influence bullet stability at different velocities? Charlie found himself diving into ballistics theory he hadn't discussed in years, explaining concepts like ballistic coefficients, sectional density, and external ballistics. Sarah absorbed every detail, occasionally pulling out a notebook to sketch diagrams or jot down formulas. What had started as a casual introduction to shooting became an impromptu physics lecture. "You've got an interesting way of thinking about this," Charlie observed after Sarah spent 15 minutes calculating wind drift using mathematical principles she had learned in her physics class. "Most people just aim and shoot. You're trying to understand the science behind it." Tom Mitchell watched his daughter's transformation with growing amazement. The girl who had reluctantly agreed to accompany him was now completely absorbed in understanding every aspect of marksmanship. She fired 20 more rounds that morning, each shot becoming more precise as she applied what she had learned about consistency and technique. By the time they left the range, Sarah had placed 5 consecutive shots within a 2-inch group at 100 yards, performance that impressed even the experienced club members who had gathered to watch. Charlie handed her a business card for a local shooting coach and suggested she might want to explore the sport more seriously. That evening, Sarah spent hours researching ballistics on the family computer, diving into online forums and technical articles about long-range shooting. She discovered a world where mathematics, physics, and engineering converged in ways that made perfect sense to her scientifically inclined mind. The more she learned, the more fascinating the challenge became. Her father, initially surprised by her interest, began to recognize something he had never seen before in his daughter's academic pursuits. Sarah had always been a good student, but her approach to shooting displayed a level of passion and intensity that was entirely new. She wasn't just learning about ballistics. She was consuming everything she could find about the science of precision marksmanship. Within 2 weeks, Sarah had read every book in the county library about marksmanship, ballistics, and competitive shooting. She had joined 3 online forums where she asked detailed questions about equipment, techniques, and training methods. Her bedroom wall became covered with ballistics charts, wind reading guides, and photos of precision rifles that most farmers had never seen. Tom Mitchell made a decision that would change both their lives. Despite the significant expense for a farming family, he agreed to purchase Sarah an entry-level precision rifle for her 18th birthday. Nothing fancy, a basic Savage bolt action with a decent scope, but a platform that would allow her to pursue her newfound passion properly. Charlie Henderson connected Sarah with Marcus Webb, a retired Marine Corps sniper who had moved to rural Iowa and occasionally coached promising young shooters. Marcus had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, where he had made shots that saved the lives of his fellow Marines. He now worked as a machinist in nearby Waterloo, but maintained his shooting skills at longer ranges than anything available at the Cedar Rapids Club. Their first meeting was at a private range that Marcus had constructed on his 40-acre property. The range extended out to 800 yards, with steel targets positioned at various distances across rolling farmland. For Sarah, accustomed to the 300-yard maximum at her local club, the sight of targets nearly half a mile away seemed almost impossible. Marcus spent their first session not shooting, but teaching Sarah to read wind. He pointed out how grass moved differently at various distances, how heat shimmer created visual illusions, and how environmental factors that seemed insignificant could dramatically affect bullet flight over long ranges. Sarah filled another notebook with observations and sketches. Shooting at 100 yards is like playing checkers, Marcus explained as they watched wind flags flutter at different angles across the range. Shooting at 800 yards is like playing 3-dimensional chess while riding a roller coaster. Everything changes, and you have to account for variables you can't even see. Sarah's first shot at 600 yards missed the 4-foot steel target by several feet. Her second shot was closer, and by her 10th shot, she had managed to connect with the steel, producing the distinctive ring that echoed across the countryside. Marcus watched carefully, noting how quickly she processed feedback and made adjustments. What impressed him most wasn't her natural ability, though she clearly had talent, but her systematic approach to learning. Sarah kept detailed logs of every shot, recording weather conditions, ammunition details, and the results of each attempt. She analyzed patterns in her misses and worked methodically to correct specific problems. "You're approaching this like a scientist," Marcus told her after watching her spend 30 minutes analyzing the data from a particularly challenging windy day session. "That's going to take you places in this sport." Sarah's progress was remarkable. Within 3 months, she was consistently hitting targets at 600 yards. Within 6 months, she had progressed to Marcus's 800-yard steel targets. Her groups were tightening, her wind reading was improving, and her understanding of ballistics had progressed to a level that impressed even Marcus. The local shooting community began to take notice. Word spread about the farm girl who was making shots that veteran hunters couldn't manage. Sarah began attending matches at clubs throughout eastern Iowa, competing in precision rifle competitions against shooters with decades of experience. Her equipment remained basic. The same Savage rifle her father had bought for her birthday, mounted with a mid-range scope that cost less than many competitors spent on just their scope rings. But Sarah had learned to extract maximum performance from her equipment through meticulous preparation and consistent technique. At her first formal competition, Sarah finished 3rd out of 27 competitors, including several former military marksmen and equipment-laden enthusiasts. Her performance drew attention from other competitors, who were curious about the young woman who was achieving impressive results with relatively modest equipment. "How long have you been shooting?" asked Jim Rodriguez, a former Army sniper who had finished just behind Sarah. "About 8 months," Sarah replied, checking her data book to confirm the exact timeline. Jim stared at her in disbelief. Most competitive marksmen measure their experience in years or decades. The idea that someone could reach this level of competence in less than a year challenged everything he thought he knew about skill development in precision shooting. Sarah's rapid progress caught the attention of the broader competitive shooting community. Marcus Webb began connecting her with other coaches and competitors who could help accelerate her development. She started traveling to matches in neighboring states, competing against increasingly skilled opposition and learning from every encounter. The transformation from reluctant range companion to serious competitive marksman had taken less than a year. Sarah was no longer the farm girl who had accidentally discovered shooting. She was becoming a precision marksman with ambitions that extended far beyond the Iowa cornfields where she had first squeezed a trigger. Her next challenge would be to move beyond regional competitions and test her skills against the best marksmen in the country. That journey would lead her to distances that most shooters never attempted, challenges that would push both her abilities and her equipment to their absolute limits. The pink rifle was still 2 years away, but the foundation of knowledge, skill, and determination that would eventually support that legendary shot was already being built, one carefully analyzed round at a time. The king of 2-mile competition in Raton, New Mexico, represented everything Sarah had been working towards since that first accidental encounter with precision shooting. Unlike the local matches she had dominated in Iowa, this event attracted the most skilled extreme long-range marksmen from across North America. The targets were positioned at distances that stretched the limits of both equipment and human capability, with the ultimate challenge being a successful hit at exactly 2 miles, 3,520 yards. Sarah's invitation to compete had come through Marcus Webb, whose military connections had brought her work to the attention of competitors who regularly pushed the boundaries of what was possible with rifle and scope. At 19, she would be the youngest competitor in the event's history and one of only 3 women among the 47 participants. The drive from Iowa to New Mexico took 2 days, with Sarah's aging Honda Civic loaded with rifle cases, ammunition boxes, and the meteorological equipment that had become essential to her shooting. Her father had insisted on making the trip, partly to support his daughter, but mostly because he still couldn't quite believe that his farm girl had progressed to competing at this level. The Whittington Center, where the competition was held, sprawled across 33,000 acres of high desert terrain that provided shooting ranges extending well beyond any distance Sarah had previously attempted. The facility had been designed specifically for extreme long-range work, with firing positions engineered to provide stable platforms for the heavy rifles and sophisticated optical equipment required for such shooting. Sarah's equipment remained modest compared to what most competitors brought. Her rifle had been upgraded to a custom-built 6.5 Creedmoor, meticulously assembled by a gunsmith in Des Moines who specialized in precision work. The scope was a significant improvement over her original equipment, but it still cost less than many competitors spent on their rifle stocks alone. What set her apart wasn't her equipment budget. It was her preparation. Sarah had spent 6 months gathering meteorological data from the Raton area, studying historical wind patterns, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure changes that could affect bullet flight. She had calculated ballistic trajectories for dozens of different scenarios, creating charts that accounted for everything from altitude effects to the Coriolis force that influenced bullet flight at extreme ranges. Registration and equipment inspection revealed the full scope of what Sarah was up against. She observed rifles that cost more than her father's pickup truck, scopes with magnification capabilities that seemed almost telescopic, and competitors who spoke casually about making shots at distances she had never even attempted. Many participants were using custom cartridges loaded with exotic powders and bullets that cost several dollars per round. First time at King of 2 Mile, asked Rebecca Martinez, one of the other female competitors, as they waited in line for equipment inspection. Rebecca was a veteran of extreme long-range competitions, with multiple wins at prestigious matches throughout the Southwest. First time shooting past 1,200 yards, actually, Sarah admitted, immediately regretting her honesty as she noticed the surprised expressions of nearby competitors. The revelation that a complete novice to extreme long-range shooting had somehow qualified for one of the sport's most prestigious competitions spread quickly through the competitor gathering area. Some veterans reacted with curiosity, while others seemed skeptical that someone with so little experience at these distances belonged in such company. Range orientation revealed the true magnitude of the challenge. The targets progressed from 1,500 yards out to the ultimate 2-mile plate, with scoring zones that required precision measured in minutes of angle rather than the inches that Sarah was accustomed to using for measurement. At 2 miles, the target appeared as a distant speck that was barely visible even through high-powered spotting scopes. At 2 miles, your bullet drop is going to be approximately 70 feet, explained Randy Morrison, the competition director, during the technical briefing. Flight time is over 4 seconds. You're dealing with multiple wind layers, temperature gradients, and atmospheric effects that can't be measured at the firing line. This isn't just marksmanship. It's ballistic engineering combined with meteorological prediction. Sarah spent the practice day observing other competitors and taking detailed notes about their techniques. She watched shooters use electronic wind meters, ballistic calculators that resembled small computers, and communication systems that allowed them to receive real-time weather updates from spotters positioned at various points along the range. Her own preparation was simpler but methodical. Sarah had brought 3 different weather monitoring devices and had spent hours studying topographical maps of the range to understand how terrain features might influence wind patterns. While other competitors relied on expensive electronic ballistic calculators, she used charts she had created by hand, cross-referenced with mathematical calculations that filled several notebooks. The first day of competition covered targets from 1,500 to 2,000 yards. Sarah's performance was solid, but not exceptional, placing her in the middle of the field. Her shots were finding the targets, but she was struggling with the complex wind reading required at these extended ranges. What she lacked in experience, however, she made up for through careful observation and rapid adaptation. "You're thinking too much," suggested Tommy Chun, a veteran competitor from California who had noticed Sarah's elaborate preparation routine. "At these ranges, you have to trust your fundamentals and make educated guesses. You can't calculate everything." But Sarah's systematic approach was beginning to pay dividends. By the afternoon of the first day, she had moved up significantly in the standings. Her shots were becoming more consistent, and her wind reading was improving with each round fired. More importantly, she was developing confidence in her ability to make successful hits at ranges that had seemed impossible just days earlier. The evening between competition days was spent analyzing performance data with an intensity that impressed even the most dedicated competitors. Sarah created detailed charts showing wind patterns throughout the day, noting how they correlated with temperature changes and time. She identified specific periods when environmental conditions created the most predictable shooting windows. Day 2 brought the ultimate challenge: shots at distances from 2,200 to 2,640 yards, culminating in the 2-mile finale. Sarah had climbed to 7th place overall, a position that exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The competitors ahead of her were all veterans with years of extreme long-range experience and equipment that represented significant financial investments. The shooting began at dawn to take advantage of the most stable atmospheric conditions. Sarah's preparation had indicated that the best shooting window would occur during the first 2 hours of daylight, before thermal currents began creating unpredictable wind patterns across the range. Her shot at 2,200 yards was a clean hit, producing the distinctive clang of bullets striking steel that echoed across the desert. The 2,400-yard target required 2 shots, but her second round found the mark. By the time the range called for the 2-mile attempts, Sarah had moved into 4th place overall. The 2-mile target seemed impossibly distant, visible only as a tiny reflection in the desert haze. Sarah spent 15 minutes studying wind indicators and consulting her hand-drawn charts before settling behind her rifle. The shot felt different from anything she had attempted, not just the distance, but the weight of expectation from competitors and spectators who had gathered to watch. Her first shot at 2 miles missed, though the spotters couldn't determine by how much at such extreme range. Sarah made careful adjustments based on her calculations and settled in for her second attempt. The trigger brake felt clean, and the bullet flight time stretched on for what seemed like an eternity before the unmistakable sound of impact reached the firing line. A successful hit at 2 miles on only her second attempt drew immediate attention from the entire competition. Veteran marksmen gathered around Sarah's shooting position, wanting to examine the rifle and equipment that had produced such an impressive shot. The fact that she had achieved this result with relatively modest gear made it even more remarkable. "How did you do that?" asked Marcus Rodriguez, a former Army marksmanship unit member who had been competing at extreme long-range events for over a decade. Sarah explained her preparation methods, showing the detailed charts and calculations that had guided her shooting decisions. Her systematic approach impressed competitors who had relied primarily on experience and intuition. The mathematical precision of her wind reading and ballistic calculations represented a level of preparation that few had seen before. Her final standing was third place overall, a result that shocked the extreme long-range shooting community. Finishing on the podium at one of the sport's most prestigious events, in her first attempt at such distances, with equipment that cost a fraction of what most competitors used, established Sarah as someone to watch in future competitions. The drive home to Iowa took on a different character than the anxious journey to New Mexico. Sarah now carried a trophy that represented validation of her systematic approach to marksmanship. More importantly, she had discovered that she belonged at the highest levels of competitive shooting. News of her performance spread quickly through shooting publications and online forums. Sarah began receiving invitations to other extreme long-range competitions, coaching offers, and sponsorship proposals from equipment manufacturers who wanted to be associated with her success. But Sarah's most significant realization during the long drive home was that 2 miles was not the limit of what was possible. During conversations with other competitors, she had learned about attempts at even greater distances, shots that pushed beyond anything attempted in formal competition. The idea of a 6,000-meter shot had been mentioned by several veterans as the theoretical limit of what might be achievable under perfect conditions with perfect preparation. That conversation would plant the seed for what would eventually become Sarah's most ambitious goal. But first, she needed to continue developing her skills and, more importantly, figure out how to finance the equipment required for such extreme challenges. The solution would come from an unexpected source and lead to the creation of the pink rifle that would define her career. That decision, born from necessity rather than choice, would set the stage for the shot that would make her a legend in the precision shooting world. Her success at King of 2 Mile had proven that systematic preparation could overcome experience and expensive equipment. Now she needed to discover whether the same approach could conquer distances that existed at the very edge of what physics and engineering made possible. The sponsorship offer from Apex Precision Rifles arrived 3 weeks after Sarah's podium finish at King of 2 Mile, delivered by overnight mail to the Mitchell family farm. The package contained a detailed proposal that would provide Sarah with a custom-built rifle specifically designed for extreme long-range shooting, along with premium components and ammunition for an entire competition season. Sarah read the proposal with growing excitement until she reached the final page, which contained a clause that made her stomach drop. In exchange for the equipment sponsorship, Apex required Sarah to serve as their primary spokesperson at major competitions and promotional events. More specifically, they wanted her to represent their new Ladies in Long Range marketing campaign, which was designed to attract more women to precision shooting sports. The campaign's centerpiece was a custom rifle that Apex had already designed and manufactured, painted in what their marketing department called competition pink. The color was intended to challenge traditional perceptions about women in shooting sports while creating a memorable visual brand that would be instantly recognizable at competitions. Sarah stared at the attached photographs of the pink rifle for nearly an hour, torn between the practical benefits of having access to equipment worth more than her family's annual farm income, and the certainty that showing up at competitions with a bright pink rifle would make her the subject of ridicule from serious competitors. "It's not exactly subtle," her father observed when Sarah showed him the proposal over dinner. "It's embarrassing," Sarah replied. "I've spent 2 years trying to be taken seriously in this sport. How can I show up at matches with a rifle that looks like it belongs in a toy store?" The financial reality, however, was inescapable. Sarah's competition budget came from her part-time job at the veterinary clinic and contributions from her father that she knew represented significant sacrifices for the family farming operation. The cost of ammunition alone for a serious extreme long-range shooting program exceeded what she could afford, let alone the expense of custom rifles and precision optics. Marcus Webb, whose coaching had been instrumental in Sarah's rapid development, provided practical perspective when she called seeking advice about the sponsorship offer. Equipment doesn't care what color it is, Marcus pointed out during their phone conversation. If Apex builds you a rifle that shoots half-minute groups at 1,000 yards, it doesn't matter if it's pink, purple, or polka-dotted. Results speak louder than appearance. But everyone's going to make fun of it, Sarah protested. Let them, Marcus replied. You've already proven you can outshoot most of them with inferior equipment. Imagine what you'll be able to do with gear that actually matches your skill level. After a sleepless week of consideration, Sarah signed the Apex sponsorship agreement. The decision felt like selling out her principles, but she rationalized it as a necessary step toward achieving her long-term goals in competitive shooting. If enduring jokes about her pink rifle was the price of access to top-tier equipment, she would accept that trade-off. The rifle arrived 6 weeks later, shipped in a custom case that bore Apex's logo and Sarah's name in flowing script. Opening the case revealed a weapon that was undeniably pink, not a subtle rose or dusty mauve, but a bright, unapologetic shade that seemed to glow under fluorescent lighting. Beyond its shocking color, however, the rifle was clearly a masterpiece of precision engineering. The action was a custom design that Apex had developed specifically for extreme long-range work, with tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of inches. The barrel was a proprietary design with twist rates optimized for the heavy, high ballistic coefficient bullets required for shots beyond 2,000 yards. The scope was equally impressive, a German-made precision instrument with magnification capabilities ranging from 5 to 45 power, combined with tracking systems that allowed for precise adjustments measured in tenths of minutes of angle. The entire package represented the state-of-the-art in precision shooting equipment. Sarah's first range session with the pink rifle confirmed both her hopes and fears about the sponsorship arrangement. The weapon's accuracy was phenomenal, producing groups at 300 yards that could be covered by a dime. Its consistency was remarkable, with shot-to-shot velocity variations that were minimal enough to allow precise trajectory predictions at extreme ranges. The reactions from other shooters, however, were exactly what Sarah had anticipated. Her arrival at the Cedar Rapids Gun Club with the pink rifle generated whispers, barely suppressed laughter, and comments that ranged from mildly teasing to openly dismissive. Looks like someone's been shopping in the Barbie aisle, commented Bill Stevens, a local hunter who had always treated Sarah's competitive success with mild skepticism. Is that thing even legal for serious competitions? Asked another club member, examining the rifle with the expression of someone trying to determine if a joke was being played on him. Charlie Henderson, the range master who had first introduced Sarah to shooting, provided the most constructive perspective. Color doesn't affect ballistics, he told the gathering crowd. If Sarah's shooting better with this rifle than she was with her old one, that's all that matters. The real test would come at Sarah's next major competition, the Rocky Mountain Precision Challenge in Colorado, an event that attracted some of the most skilled long-range marksmen in North America. The match featured targets extending out to 2,800 yards, representing Sarah's longest competitive shooting distance to date. Her arrival at the Colorado competition with the pink rifle created exactly the reaction she had expected. Competitors gathered around her vehicle as she unloaded equipment, staring at the rifle case with expressions that ranged from amusement to disbelief. The whispered comments and barely contained laughter followed her from the parking area to the registration desk. Well, this should be interesting, observed Janet Williams, one of the few other female competitors, as she watched the attention Sarah's equipment was receiving. You're either very brave or completely insane. Probably both, Sarah admitted, trying to project confidence while internally questioning her decision to accept the sponsorship. The match began with targets at 1,600 yards, a distance where Sarah felt comfortable and confident. Her first shot with the pink rifle was a center hit, producing the satisfying clang that indicated a successful impact. The second shot was equally precise, as was the third. As the competition progressed through increasingly challenging distances, Sarah's performance with the new rifle exceeded even her optimistic expectations. The weapon's superior accuracy allowed her to make hits that would have been marginal or impossible with her previous equipment. More importantly, the rifle's consistency gave her confidence to attempt shots in marginal wind conditions that she might have passed on with less capable equipment. By the end of the first day, Sarah had moved into second place overall, trailing only Derek Hamilton, a former Marine Corps sniper with over 15 years of competitive shooting experience. The combination of her improved equipment and systematic preparation methods was producing results that impressed even seasoned competitors. "I've got to admit," said Tom Bradley, a veteran shooter from Texas who had initially joked about the pink rifle, "that thing shoots better than most of the rigs here. Color doesn't mean much when you're putting shots where they need to go." The attitude shift among competitors was subtle but noticeable. The initial dismissive comments gave way to respectful curiosity about Sarah's equipment and techniques. Shooters who had originally seemed amused by the pink rifle began asking serious questions about its specifications and performance characteristics. The final day of competition included the 2,800-yard challenge, a distance that only half the competitors would even attempt. Wind conditions were marginal, with shifting patterns that made precise wind reading extremely difficult. Many experienced shooters elected to skip the longest shots rather than risk poor scores that might affect their overall standings. Sarah spent 30 minutes analyzing wind indicators and consulting the detailed meteorological charts she had prepared specifically for the Colorado location. The pink rifle drew less attention now. Competitors had seen its capabilities and were more interested in understanding how Sarah used it so effectively. Her first shot at 2,800 yards was a miss, though the spotters indicated it was close enough to suggest her ballistic calculations were accurate. Sarah made minor adjustments based on the miss and settled in for her second attempt. The shot felt perfect, with a clean trigger break and no detectable movement during the follow-through. The bullet flight time at 2,800 yards stretched to nearly 4 seconds, long enough for Sarah to complete her follow-through and return to her scope before impact. The distinctive sound of bullets striking steel echoed across the valley, confirming a successful hit at a distance that many competitors had never attempted. The hit at 2,800 yards secured Sarah's victory in the overall competition, her first major win since beginning her extreme long-range shooting career. More significantly, it established the pink rifle as a serious piece of equipment rather than a marketing gimmick. Competitors who had initially dismissed it now wanted to examine its features and understand how Apex had achieved such remarkable accuracy. During the award ceremony, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her perspective had changed over the course of the competition. What had begun as an embarrassing compromise forced by financial necessity had evolved into a source of pride and identity. The pink rifle was no longer something she endured. It had become part of her competitive advantage. "You've changed how people think about that rifle," observed Derek Hamilton during the post-match gathering. "When you showed up, everyone thought it was a joke. Now, they're wondering if pink rifles shoot better than traditional colors." The sponsorship arrangement with Apex had achieved exactly what their marketing department had intended. Sarah's success with the pink rifle generated significant media attention, including features in shooting magazines and online articles that focused on her unconventional equipment choices. The Ladies in Long Range campaign gained traction as other female shooters began expressing interest in competitive precision shooting. More importantly, for Sarah's career development, the victory in Colorado led to invitations to even more prestigious competitions. Her name was now mentioned among the top extreme long-range competitors in North America, and the pink rifle had become her trademark signature. The success also attracted attention from competitors and organizations involved in attempting record-setting shots at distances beyond anything attempted in formal competition. Sarah began receiving inquiries about her interest in participating in attempts to establish new world records for extreme long-range marksmanship. One inquiry in particular caught her attention: an invitation to participate in an attempt to make a successful shot at 6,000 meters, a distance that would represent the absolute limit of what current technology and human skill could achieve. The attempt would be informal, more of a scientific experiment than a competition, but it would offer Sarah the opportunity to push the boundaries of what was considered possible in precision shooting. The idea of a 6,000-meter shot represented everything Sarah had been working towards since that first accidental encounter with marksmanship on her father's weekend range trip. It would require equipment, preparation, and skill at levels beyond anything she had previously attempted. Most significantly, it would test whether her systematic, scientific approach to shooting could succeed at distances where traditional marksmanship techniques became inadequate. The pink rifle that had begun as an embarrassing compromise was about to become the instrument for one of the most ambitious shots in the history of precision marksmanship. The invitation to attempt a 6,000-meter shot came from Dr. Michael Chun, a ballistics engineer at the Army Research Laboratory who had been following Sarah's competition results with professional interest. Dr. Chun was leading an unofficial project to explore the absolute limits of small arms accuracy, working with a team of engineers, meteorologists, and master marksmen to push beyond anything previously attempted in precision shooting. "We're not trying to set official records," Dr. Chun explained during their initial phone conversation. "This is pure research. We want to understand what's physically possible when you optimize every variable involved in extreme long-range shooting. Your systematic approach to ballistics and demonstrated ability at extended ranges make you an ideal candidate for the project." The proposed shot would take place at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, where the military testing facility provided both the necessary distance and controlled environment required for such an extreme attempt. The 6,000-meter target distance represented nearly 3.75 miles, requiring bullet flight times of over 6 seconds and trajectory calculations that accounted for factors irrelevant at normal shooting ranges. Sarah's acceptance of the invitation initiated 6 months of preparation that would test both her technical knowledge and physical capabilities. Dr. Chen's team had identified dozens of variables that became significant at such extreme ranges, from atmospheric pressure variations to the Earth's rotation effects on bullet flight. Each factor required individual study and integration into an overall ballistic solution. The ammunition development alone represented an engineering challenge that pushed beyond conventional reloading practices. Working with Apex Precision and a specialized ammunition manufacturer, the team developed custom cartridges loaded with experimental powders and bullets designed specifically for the 6,000-meter attempt. Each round cost over $50 to produce and required individual quality control testing before being approved for use. Sarah's pink rifle needed significant modifications to handle the extreme ballistic requirements. The scope was upgraded to a custom-built instrument with magnification capabilities extending to 60 power, combined with tracking systems that could accommodate the massive adjustments required for such extended ranges. The entire rifle was rebedded and the trigger system refined to eliminate any mechanical inconsistencies that might affect accuracy. Physical preparation became as important as equipment modifications. At 6,000 meters, the slightest movement during trigger squeeze would translate into target misses measured in yards rather than inches. Sarah began working with a sports psychologist to develop breathing techniques and mental focus strategies that would allow her to maintain absolute stillness during the extended time required for each shot sequence. The meteorological aspects of the project required collaboration with weather service professionals who could provide real-time atmospheric data during the shooting attempt. Wind patterns at 6,000 meters involved multiple layers moving at different speeds and directions, creating three-dimensional puzzles that required computer modeling to understand. Temperature gradients, humidity variations, and pressure changes all became significant factors at such distances. Dr. Chen's team constructed elaborate computer models that simulated bullet flight over the proposed distance, accounting for variables that had never been systematically studied in previous long-range shooting attempts. The models indicated that successful hits would require environmental conditions within very narrow parameters, potentially limiting shooting opportunities to brief windows when all factors align favorably. At 6,000 meters, we're dealing with physics that barely qualify as small arms ballistics, Dr. Chin explained during one of Sarah's preparation sessions at White Sands. The bullet drop is over 400 feet. Flight time exceeds 6 seconds. Wind effects are measured in tens of yards rather than inches. We're essentially doing artillery calculations for rifle ammunition. Sarah's training regimen expanded to include work with military spotters who had experience calling wind conditions for indirect fire systems. The techniques used for reading environmental conditions at artillery ranges proved more applicable to 6,000-meter rifle shooting than traditional marksmanship methods. Sarah learned to interpret wind indicators that were invisible to normal shooting practices. The team identified a specific target area at White Sands that provided the necessary distance while minimizing terrain-induced wind turbulence. The firing position was constructed with engineering precision, creating a stable platform that eliminated any possibility of movement during the shooting sequence. Multiple wind measurement stations were positioned along the bullet's flight path to provide real-time data about environmental conditions. Practice sessions at progressively longer ranges revealed both the potential and limitations of the project. Sarah successfully made hits at 4,000 meters during training, establishing confidence that 6,000-meter accuracy was theoretically possible. However, the practice also demonstrated how environmental conditions could make hitting even large targets impossible when wind patterns became unfavorable. The ammunition testing process consumed 3 months of preparation time. Each experimental cartridge required individual testing to verify consistency and accuracy potential. Slight variations in powder charges, bullet seating depths, or case preparation that would be irrelevant at normal ranges became critically important at 6,000 meters. The final ammunition selection process involved testing over 200 different load combinations to identify the optimal ballistic performance. Sarah's shooting technique required fundamental modifications to accommodate the extreme ranges involved. Traditional marksmanship fundamentals became inadequate when dealing with targets that appeared as tiny dots, even through high-powered optics. She developed new approaches to sight alignment, trigger control, and follow-through that were specifically adapted to the unique requirements of ultra-long-range shooting. Mental preparation became equally important as physical training. The pressure of attempting something that had never been successfully accomplished in controlled conditions created psychological challenges that extended beyond normal competitive stress. Sarah worked with performance coaches to develop visualization techniques and stress management strategies that would allow her to perform optimally during the actual attempt. The project attracted attention from the broader shooting community as news of the 6,000-meter attempt began circulating through specialized publications and online forums. Many experienced marksmen expressed skepticism that such a shot was even theoretically possible with conventional rifle ammunition, while others followed the preparation progress with fascination. Media interest created additional pressure as shooting magazines and online publications requested access to document the attempt. Dr. Chin's team agreed to limited coverage, recognizing the educational value of sharing their research methods while managing the distraction that media attention might create during the actual shooting. Equipment failures during practice sessions highlighted the extreme demands that 6,000-meter shooting placed on conventional components. Scope tracking systems that worked perfectly at normal ranges occasionally experienced mechanical problems when adjusted to the massive corrections required for such distances. Backup systems and redundant equipment became essential components of the preparation plan. The pink rifle's distinctive color created unexpected challenges during preparation. At 6,000 meters, visual identification of the rifle's position became difficult for spotters using conventional observation equipment. The team eventually added high-visibility markers to help spotters maintain visual contact with the firing position during shot sequences. Weather monitoring revealed that suitable conditions for the 6,000-meter attempt occurred infrequently at White Sands. The combination of low wind speeds, stable atmosphere pressure, and appropriate temperature gradients created shooting windows that might last only 20 to 30 minutes and could be separated by weeks of unsuitable conditions. Training with the modified pink rifle confirmed both its accuracy potential and the extreme precision required for success at 6,000 meters. Groups that would be considered excellent at 1,000 yards translated into target misses measured in yards at the extreme distance. Every aspect of the shooting process, from ammunition handling to trigger squeeze, required perfection levels that exceeded anything demanded in conventional marksmanship. The final month of preparation focused on integrating all the individual components into a complete system. Sarah practiced with the exact ammunition, equipment, and environmental monitoring systems that would be used during the actual attempt. The practice sessions revealed subtle interactions between different variables that could only be discovered through repeated testing under realistic conditions. Team coordination became as important as individual marksmanship skills. The 6,000-meter attempt would require precise timing between weather monitoring, ballistic calculations, and shooting execution. Communication systems were tested, and backup procedures developed to ensure that brief windows of optimal conditions could be utilized effectively. As the preparation period concluded, Sarah had developed capabilities that extended far beyond conventional marksmanship skills. Her understanding of ballistics, meteorology, and precision shooting had evolved to levels that impressed even Dr. Chen's team of military and academic experts. The pink rifle had been transformed from a precision shooting instrument into a highly specialized tool designed for a single, extraordinary purpose. The stage was set for an attempt that would either establish new possibilities for human marksmanship achievement or demonstrate the absolute limits of what could be accomplished with small arms accuracy. Either outcome would represent a significant contribution to understanding the physics and human factors involved in extreme precision shooting. The actual shooting attempt would test everything Sarah had learned about marksmanship, ballistics, and mental performance under the most demanding conditions ever attempted in the history of precision shooting. The pink rifle that had once been a source of embarrassment was about to become the instrument for either the greatest individual marksmanship achievement ever documented or a lesson in the ultimate limits of human and equipment capabilities. The morning of the 6,000-meter attempt dawned with conditions that Dr. Chen's meteorological team had identified as nearly perfect for extreme long-range shooting. The wind was calm across the entire bullet flight path. Atmospheric pressure was stable, and temperature gradients were minimal. After 6 weeks of waiting for suitable weather conditions, Sarah would finally have her opportunity to attempt the impossible shot. Sarah arrived at the White Sands firing position before sunrise, beginning a meticulous equipment check that had been refined through months of practice. Every component of the pink rifle was inspected and verified: scope settings, ammunition temperature, mechanical adjustments, and backup systems. The rifle that had once been a source of embarrassment now represented the culmination of precision engineering and systematic preparation. The target area, 6,000 meters distant across the desert floor, was barely visible even through the high-powered spotting scopes positioned at the firing line. Heat shimmer hadn't yet begun to distort visibility, creating optimal optical conditions for the attempt. Multiple camera systems were positioned to document every aspect of the shot sequence, from bullet impact to Sarah's technique during the firing process. Dr. Chen's team had calculated that Sarah would have approximately 30 minutes of optimal shooting conditions before rising temperatures created atmospheric disturbances that would make accurate shooting impossible. Within that window, she would have perhaps 10 opportunities to make the shot, limited by the time required for careful preparation between each attempt. Remember, this isn't about proving anything to anyone else, Dr. Chen told Sarah as she settled behind the pink rifle for final sight alignment checks. We're exploring the absolute limits of what's possible. Whether you make the shot or not, we're learning something valuable about the physics involved. Sarah's first shot preparation took 12 minutes. as she methodically worked through every element of her shooting checklist. Wind readings from stations positioned along the bullet's flight path were analyzed and integrated into ballistic calculations that accounted for conditions at multiple ranges. The scope settings required adjustments so massive that they exceeded the normal tracking range of most precision instruments. The ammunition for the 6,000-meter attempt represented the pinnacle of precision reloading technology. Each cartridge had been individually tested and selected from batches that demonstrated the consistency required for such extreme accuracy demands. The powder charges were measured to within individual kernels, and bullet seeding depths were controlled to tolerances measured in thousandths of inches. Through her scope, Sarah could barely distinguish the target area as a slight discoloration against the desert background. At maximum magnification, the 6,000-meter target appeared as a fuzzy that required concentration to keep in focus. Traditional sight pictures became meaningless at such distances. Success would depend entirely on calculated ballistic solutions rather than visual alignment with the target. Her breathing technique, refined through months of practice with sports psychology coaches, allowed Sarah to achieve the absolutely stillness required for the shot. At 6,000 meters, any movement during trigger squeeze would translate into target misses measured in yards. The pink rifle had to remain perfectly motionless for the 6-second bullet flight time to maintain any possibility of accuracy. The first shot felt perfect as it left the rifle. The recoil impulse was clean, with no indication of mechanical problems or shooter-induced errors. Sarah maintained her shooting position and scope alignment to observe the impact, though the extreme distance made visual confirmation impossible without electronic support from the spotting team. No impact observed, came the report from the downrange spotters after several seconds of searching. The miss wasn't unexpected. Statistical models had indicated that successful hits would require multiple attempts even under optimal conditions. Sarah began immediate preparation for her second shot, incorporating lessons learned from the first attempt. Ballistic calculations were refined based on actual atmospheric conditions measured during the first shot's flight time. Slight variations in wind speed at different ranges along the bullet's path required adjustments to the horizontal corrections that had been programmed into the scope. The mathematical precision required exceeded anything demanded in conventional shooting sports. Sarah's second shot was fired 8 minutes after the first, as soon as complete preparation could be accomplished. The extended bullet flight time created unusual challenges for maintaining shooting concentration. She had to maintain perfect position and mental focus for periods that exceeded normal human attention spans. The specialized training with performance coaches proved essential for managing these psychological demands. The second shot also missed, though spotters indicated it appeared closer to the target area. Dr. Chin's team analyzed electronic tracking data from sensors positioned along the range, identifying specific atmospheric factors that had affected bullet flight. The information was immediately incorporated into calculations for the third attempt. "You're learning the range," observed Marcus Webb, who had flown to New Mexico to witness the historic attempt. "Each shot is teaching you something about how conditions affect bullet flight at this distance." That's exactly the systematic approach that's made you successful. Atmospheric conditions remained favorable as Sarah prepared for a third shot, though temperature readings indicated that optimal shooting weather wouldn't last much longer. The time pressure created additional stress that she managed through visualization techniques and breathing exercises that had become second nature during months of preparation. The third shot incorporated all the environmental data gathered from the previous attempts, with ballistic calculations adjusted for measured rather than predicted atmospheric conditions. Sarah's confidence in her equipment and technique was absolute. If a 6,000-meter hit was physically possible, she possessed the capabilities to achieve it. The shot sequence felt identical to the previous attempts, with clean trigger break and perfect follow-through. Sarah maintained her shooting position and waited for the spotter's report, knowing that bullet flight time at 6,000 meters created several seconds of uncertainty between firing and impact confirmation. "Stand by for impact assessment," came the radio communication from the downrange team. The extended pause that followed created tension among the observing team members who understood the historical significance of what they were attempting to document. Impact confirmed. Target hit. The simple statement from the spotting team created a moment of stunned silence at the firing line. Sarah remained behind her rifle, not entirely certain she had heard the report correctly. The successful hit at 6,000 meters represented something that had never been accomplished under controlled conditions with documented procedures. Dr. Chen's team immediately began verification procedures to confirm the impact and document the shooting conditions that had made the hit possible. Multiple independent spotters confirmed the successful target strike, and electronic monitoring systems provided precise data about environmental conditions during the bullet's flight time. The celebration was subdued, but intense, as team members who had spent months working toward this moment tried to process what they had just witnessed. Sarah's systematic approach to marksmanship had achieved something that many experts had considered theoretically impossible with conventional rifle ammunition. "You just rewrote the book on what's possible in precision shooting," Dr. Chen told Sarah as she finally raised her head from behind the pink rifle. "This shot is going to be studied and analyzed for years by people trying to understand how you did it." News of the 6,000-meter shot spread rapidly through the precision shooting community, generating immediate attention from competitors, equipment manufacturers, and media organizations who wanted to understand the technical details of the achievement. The pink rifle that had once been a source of mockery became the most famous precision instrument in the history of marksmanship sports. Sarah's achievement validated the systematic, scientific approach to shooting that she had developed since that first accidental encounter with marksmanship at her local gun club. The mathematical precision and methodical preparation that had characterized her entire competitive career had culminated in a shot that pushed the absolute boundaries of human and equipment capabilities. The technical data gathered during the 6,000-meter shot provided valuable information for Dr. Chen's research into extreme ballistics, contributing to understanding of atmospheric effects, ammunition performance, and human factors at previously unexplored shooting distances. The achievement represented both a personal milestone for Sarah and a significant contribution to marksmanship science. Equipment manufacturers immediately began analyzing the specifications and performance characteristics of the pink rifle, seeking to understand how relatively conventional components had achieved such extraordinary accuracy. Sarah's success demonstrated that systematic preparation and superior technique could overcome equipment disadvantages that had previously been considered insurmountable. The shot's impact extended beyond the precision shooting community, attracting attention from military organizations, engineering schools, and physics departments interested in the ballistic principles involved. Sarah found herself invited to speak at technical conferences and military installations where her methods were studied as examples of systematic problem-solving under extreme conditions. Media coverage of the achievement focused heavily on the pink rifle's unconventional color and Sarah's journey from reluctant farm girl to record-setting marksman. The story resonated with audiences far beyond the shooting community, inspiring features in mainstream publications that introduced precision shooting to readers who had never considered it as a sport requiring scientific knowledge and athletic skill. For Sarah personally, the 6,000-meter shot represented vindication of every difficult decision she had made during her competitive career. The pink rifle that had once embarrassed her had become the instrument for achieving something that would define her legacy in precision shooting. The systematic approach she had developed through years of study and practice had proven capable of solving problems that existed at the very edge of physical possibility. The achievement also created new opportunities and responsibilities as Sarah became recognized as one of the world's leading experts in extreme long-range shooting. Invitations arrived from organizations seeking her expertise for research projects, equipment development, and training programs that could benefit from her unique combination of theoretical knowledge and practical experience. Looking back at her shooting position across the 6,000 meters of desert floor where her bullet had traveled in just over 6 seconds, Sarah reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. The accidental introduction to shooting, the systematic development of skills, the sponsorship arrangement that had created the pink rifle, and the methodical preparation for this ultimate challenge had all contributed to an achievement that exceeded her most ambitious goals. The pink rifle remained in its shooting position for several minutes after the successful shot, as if reluctant to end its moment in history. When Sarah finally picked up the weapon that had made her famous, she realized that it had evolved far beyond the embarrassing compromise she had once considered it to be. The rifle had become a symbol of perseverance, systematic preparation, and the power of scientific thinking applied to athletic achievement. The 6,000-meter shot had silenced every critic who had ever questioned Sarah's unconventional equipment choices or systematic approach to marksmanship. More importantly, it had demonstrated that the absolute limits of human achievement could be pushed beyond what conventional wisdom considered possible, provided one was willing to think differently about apparently insurmountable problems. The pink rifle that had once generated laughter and whispered comments would now be remembered as the instrument that redefined what was possible in precision shooting, carried by a farm girl who had refused to accept that systematic preparation couldn't overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it appeared to be.